fell asleep and it's so painful. So painful. Oh, sweet mercy. That hurts. I can't move.
Perfect faces, they all belong in magazines. Those girls the boys are chasing.
Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So I'm finally filming in the new house, which is great. I'm behind my Christmas tree, which we still have not taken down. My stand that I'm using to hold up the camera is not working properly, so it's kind of like going back and forth, and I'm just trying to hold it up and pray that right now I look semi-decent. I don't know how that's going, so I hope everything's adjusted well. And yeah, so I figured I would make a quick video to wrap up every single book that I read in 2018, which was a grand total of 40 books, and I reached my Goodreads goal after I changed it from 50 to 40 because I knew I wasn't going to reach 50 books. And then at midnight, like right before midnight, like I think 30 minutes before, I reached the goal. So I'm pretty proud of myself, and I'm super happy that it happened, and I'm so glad I was able to do it. And it was great. It was a great feeling. I set up my new Goodreads goal, by the way, for 2019, which is 55 books. So hopefully I'll hit that because it's 15 more books than last year. So fingers crossed that I will reach that goal. So anyway, let's go ahead and get started on all the books that I read last year. So the first book I read in 2018 was Always and Forever Lara Jean, which is the third and final book in the Summer I Turned Pretty series. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars because whenever I read it, I remember I enjoyed it a lot. I really did, but I also had some issues with it, mainly to do with Lara Jean and Peter's relationship. It just there's some stuff that caused me grief, I remember. But yeah, so the next book I read was Emma by Jane Austen. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I remember it was like very hard to kind of get into initially because there were just so many characters I disliked, and it was just kind of hard to like really get into it. And then something happened and I was like, bam, this is great. So I really enjoyed it towards the end, about like the halfway point and on. I began to really enjoy it. The next book that I read was The Horse and His Boy, which was the third book in the Chronicles of Narnia series. Yeah, the third book. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. It was okay. I liked the ending. I liked how that turned out. I just remember it took me a really long time to actually ever like complete it, and I'm proud of myself that I actually ended up doing it. But it just took me forever, and you know, I enjoyed the ending when it came down to it, but I remember it was hard going at first. But I feel like if I reread it, I might have enjoyed it a little bit more, or read it a little later. I wouldn't have had as much of an issue, but I don't know. Anyway, the next book I read was Flipped. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. The story just really flowed nicely, and I loved the whole thing in general. It's really great. It goes back and forth between the point of view of the girl and the guy, and it kind of just goes over the same thing kind of multiple times. Kind of repetitive in that way, but it's in their different points of view, which makes it kind of not repetitive, if that makes sense. It was really great. The next book I read was Julius Caesar, and I read this for school, and I hated it. I gave it a 2 out of 5 stars. It was I just hated it. I had issues understanding it. The whole thing was terrible, and I just, no. The next book that I read was Every Last Word. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars because I really liked the story itself. It talked about a girl who had like OCD, if I remember correctly, and poetry helps her get out of her comfort zone and address more of the issues in her life rather than kind of hide from them. Next book that I read was Vampire Knight, Volume 1. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. It was pretty good. I highly recommend it. I need to finish the rest of the series. I need to go get it once I get paid and have money. I need to do it. It needs to be a thing. So anyway, the next book I read was Macbeth, and shockingly enough, I actually gave this one a 4 out of 5, and I'm not quite sure why. I remember there was something in the story that kept me intrigued. I don't remember what that was. I really don't remember what that was. I'm very fuzzy on what the story was about, actually, and I know that's really terrible because it was only like not even a year ago like almost a year, but not quite there yet. And I don't remember. Wow. My memory is terrible, guys. So bad. But I remember, even though I couldn't really understand it that well, like at times it was like the story was just so good I could overlook it. The next book I read was The Cruel Prince. I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. I remember like it had some issues in the beginning, but like the story was just so good and the ending was so interesting. I was just like, yep, I'm ready. Like I like it. It's dope. It's pretty dope. The next book was actually my favorite book of the year. It was Salt to the Sea. I give it a 5 out of 5 stars. Guys, this is a book that I recommend. Like, it's so amazing, and I don't want to get into it, but it's just like, it's so good, and you really need to go check it out if you haven't yet. If you haven't read it, please do. I can't express enough how good it is. The next book I read was The Picture of Dorian Gray. Now, in all honesty, I gave it the rating that I did because I liked the ending. I liked the way it ended, and I was like, dang, that was clever. But the story itself was terrible. Like, the characters were just so bad, and every single word that came out of Dorian Gray's mouth, I just kind of wanted to slap him. And it was so bad. It was so bad. I gave it a 4 out of 5, but I only did it because of the ending, and I took pity on it. But I was like, because the ending was so good. But I'm like, the story itself is just so terrible. Like, it got on my nerves. It really did. Like, I mean, it's a good story, like, you know, but it's also really terrible, if that makes sense. So, the next book I read was Along for the Ride. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I remember Sarah Dessen she loves to make sure that I hate the parents, and she really did that in this book, and I was just agitated and ticked off, and I can't express the anger, but anyway. The next book I read was The Second Summer of the Sisterhood. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I loved it so much. It was not exactly what I was expecting, and I liked that. I loved the way it ended, and I can't wait to read the next book this summer. I'm probably going to make myself wait till then, because I'm terrible like that, and I'm going to make myself suffer. I give that a 5 out of 5. The next book I read was The Summer I Turned Pretty Trilogy. I can't talk. I gave the whole series a 5 out of 5 stars. I reread it. It was a reread, which sounds really uncomfortable and awkward to say, but, I still enjoyed it just as much the second time, except the third book was kind of painful to read, because I don't know if it was the third book or if it was the second book, because there was just certain aspects of it that were really painful to read, because I knew it was coming, and it was just so, like, it was cringy, but I still love it with everything in me, and I highly recommend those books. They're so good, and I recommend waiting till the summer to read them because it'll give you summer vibes. Anyway, the next book that I read was Persuasion. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars because it was not too exciting for me. It was definitely my least favorite Jane Austen novel that I've read, which I've only read 3, so I mean, like, that's not saying much, but this one's definitely my least favorite. It was an interesting story, but there were certain aspects of it that were just kind of hard to get through, and it wasn't as good as it could have been, if that makes sense. The next book that I read was Cut. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. I'm gonna give you guys the description, but it's just basically about this girl who, like, cuts herself, and it goes along with her journey, trying to get help and everything, and it's a really good book. It's a quick read. You'll be obsessed. It's really good. I really highly recommend it. It's so good. The next book I read was Someone Like You. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. It is a very interesting story, and it talks a lot about friendship, and it, like, in all honesty, it's a good book. It's a good one. But, you know, there are certain aspects of it that I really did loathe. But I feel like that's the point, though, because you're not supposed to, like, enjoy it wholeheartedly, if that makes sense. Like, because there's just certain parts of it that you kind of loathe. I think it's the point. But, yeah. Sorry, Malcolm in the Middle is still on right next to me, and I'm very entertained. And you guys are probably hearing it, but I didn't want to turn the TV down completely, because I'm lazy. Next book that I read was From Twinkle with Love. I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars. While some of it was hard to read, and the ending was good, but at the same time kind of bad because it was hard to get through and get to, I enjoyed it very much. The next book that I read was The Last Song. Now this is probably the second book in history that has made me cry. And of course it's Nicholas Sparks, so it's gonna make you cry, but I've never actually cried with any of his books before. This is like the only one that I've cried with. And this is the first book, I think, since Divergent that I've actually, like, cried. Well, no, it wasn't the first Divergent book, it was the last one. It was Allegiant. I cried. And, you know, this one I cried as well. And anyone who's familiar with The Last Song, the movie or the book, like, I don't really care. Pretty much goes the same way. Same thing pretty much happens. That breaks all of our hearts, but hey. In the book, though, they hit you harder. I'm gonna be honest. They hit you real good in the book, because... Anyway, I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. It's good. It's good. I recommend it. Next one I read is The Truth About Forever. I gave it a 3 out of 5 because I couldn't. I had issues with the story because her mother is just like... Sarah Dessen really does like to do stuff with parents and make them hard to like, but she really went overboard with this mom, and it was just so frustrating. And I'm like sitting there like, you can tell your mom, just tell her, don't hold it in, tell your mother. And she never does, and it's incredibly frustrating, and it's incredibly annoying, and I can't do it. I'm done. So still a good story, but it could have, her mother needs help. The next book that I read is Prince Caspian. It is the 4th book in the Chronicles of Narnia series. I gave it a 4 out of 5. I really enjoyed it, which I was really shocked by. I wasn't expecting to actually like enjoy it as much as I did. And I'm very pleased with how it went. So, and then the next one is Paper Things, which I was actually not expecting to like as well as I did. I gave it a 4 out of 5. It is a really great story about a girl who, you know, who has to deal with homelessness. Next book I read was Pride, Prejudice, and Zombies. Now, if you guys are thinking, like, oh my gosh, why in the world would you read this? This is basically somebody kind of butchering Pride and Prejudice. Well, they kind of did, but there are certain aspects of this that are just like you can't help but read it. Anyway, it was really good. I gave it a 4 out of 5. Okay, the next book that I read was The Cursed Child. And while there were certain aspects of it that were shocking, I was also kind of disappointed with it. I expected so much better, but I still gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. So it was pretty good. This next book is so hyped up, and I was expecting it to be so good, and I just wasn't a fan, and it caused me so much anger. It was Wuthering Heights. And guys, everyone's like, oh my gosh, it's such a great epic love story. I'm like, to me, it just seems like a bunch of manipulative, rude people like coming at each other, and it's absolutely terrible. Like, I like the fact that in the end, certain aspect of the end, but otherwise than that, like, it was terrible. Like, it really was, and I can't wait the book. I really anyway, so the next book that I read was Inkspell, which is the 2nd book in the Inkheart series. I absolutely loved it. I wasn't expecting to, because with Inkheart, I had issues getting through the book. It was hard to do. This one, while I did have its moments where it was hard to get through, the story was just so amazing. Everything about it was amazing. I love it. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read was actually, I think, the first book that I read for school. Well, actually, no, this was the 2nd book. But I didn't mark another one. I guess technically I read 41 books because I did read The Cursed Child, but I read The Pilgrim's Progress. My mind's not working with me right now. I read the first part of it talking about Christian's journey. I didn't read the second half involving the other person's journey. I forgot who it was. I think it was his wife's journey. I'm not sure. But I read that part, so I guess technically I could, I read that story. So if we want to count that, then 41 or 40 and a half, I don't know. Anyway, so the actual full book that I read for school was Tarzan of the Apes. It's a really great story. While you have to remember the time period it was written, because there were certain stuff about it that was just like, no. But it was pretty good. Disliked the ending, but it's a book series, so I'm coming back to it. And I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. The next one that I read was My Plain Jane. You have to kind of like read it and read the description because I'm terrible at saying it. But like, it's so funny, it's so interesting, it's so good. I highly recommend it. 4 out of 5, guys. So good. It's so good. Really recommend it. A Living Nightmare, the first book in the Cirque du Freak series, was the next book that I read, and I believe I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I did not write it down because I'm an idiot. But it is a really good story. I was shocked by how quick I read it. I read it with like in 24 hours, definitely. I read it within that time, and it was pretty good. It was a pretty good read. I can't wait to continue on with the book series. I need to go shopping for books next time I get paid and get really cheap ones. That's what I need to do. The next book that I read was The Kidnapping of Christina Lattimore. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars and was incredibly disappointed with it. Basically, the ending was rushed. She just figured out stuff that she shouldn't have been able to figure out within such a short period of time, and it was just like, it was so agitating, and like there was no build up whatsoever. And yeah, the next book I also really was not a fan of was Lord of the Flies. Now, I liked the aspect of where it was like what the Lord of the Flies is, and like how crazy things got with the boys at times, but at the same time it was also incredibly terrible. They treated Piggy like garbage, and I am done. And I gave it a 3 out of 5, but because there was a slight interesting part in it that I had to just like up it. Anyway, the next book I read was also for school, and it was The Outsiders. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. It was so good. And this was actually the last book I read in the semester. I completed it before class, like before I was supposed to. Like, I completed it like so quick, and I turned in some work, but like, you know, like I read it so quickly, and I don't know what I'm saying anymore, guys. I'm kind of out of it at this moment, and I don't know where I'm going, and I'm kind of rambling. Wow. But anyway, guys, it's so good. And the movie, while it doesn't complete with everything in the book, it's also really good. So they're both dope, because I watched the movie right after I completed the book. Yep. Anyway, the next book, it was Red Riding Hood. This book, I read this because I had watched the movie, which I know is terrible. Again, terrible. But I thought I'd do it. And I was so disappointed with the book. Like, the movie had a different ending than the book. But the thing is, I liked the movie ending better than the book ending, because the movie ending was more satisfying than the book ending. And it was like, you know, while there were certain aspects of both that were incredibly cringy, yeah, so I give it a 3 out of 5, and I do recommend the movie. The book, read it with your own peril. And if you guys got my Goodread updates, you guys know some stuff happened, and like I talked about it a little, well, gave a little tidbit of it, and you see a thing that says, "No, Henry, look away." The movie, it wasn't that bad. The book, oh my gosh, Henry should have looked away. But anyway, so the next book that I read was Crazy Rich Asians. So I gave Crazy Rich Asians a 4 out of 5 stars. I have the full review of it up on my Goodreads, which I'll be linking down below. And you guys can get all that, because I gave a pretty decent review, I felt like, to give you guys a whole explanation onto how I feel about the book and why I felt that way. At least, like, enough to where you guys can understand. Because I feel like right now I'm not in, like, a good position to try to explain that. The next book that I read was actually another reread, and it was Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, or the Philosopher's Stone, depending on whichever title you prefer to use. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars because it's a classic and it's so good. It's so good. The next book that I read was Little Women. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars, and was kind of shocked by the ending because I've seen so many different movie and TV show adaptations. Well, actually, I've only seen 2. But, like, with the way that they end it, it's like I expected there to be more to the ending rather than what we got. And I don't know if it's going to be like in Little Men they explain this a little more, or if they just do like a quick little recap, and I'm not satisfied because I'm just kind of shocked. Or maybe, I don't know if it was like an edition that I got or what the whole thing was, but I don't know. Anyway, so the next book that I read was Angus Thongs and Full Frontal Snogging. This was the book, actually the last book that I read in 2019, but, well, not 2019, 2018. It's 2019 now, but, basically, this was the last book I read, but I got but Goodreads got them out of order, so I wrote them down out of order ever so slightly. But anyway, I completed this within like 30 minutes before midnight, like 30 minutes before at least. And I was shocked that I was able to do it, but it was like such a quick read, such an easy read, and you know, I mean, like there are certain aspects about the book that could have been better, but at the same time, it's like, it's such a fun read, you overlook it. It's good. It's really good. And then the last book on this list, which actually wasn't the last book I read in the new year, it was before the last one, but I still read it in the same day, was One of Us is Lying. I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars. I was pretty much mesmerized by how everything turned out. I definitely didn't see a lot, like that whole ending coming, because it was great. It's really good. And then that was it. That was every single book I read in the year 2018. Follow, guys, again, go check me out on Goodreads to keep up with everything I'll be reading in 2019. My goal is to read 5 books every month at least, and hopefully I will reach that goal. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, please be sure to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I will be uploading videos, and I'm so sorry I was not uploading a lot towards the end of December. I said I would, had every intention of doing it, never happened. So now I'm actually making myself. It's great. It's good. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.